Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's something that I find like really wonderful about Theosophy is that it encourages us to find our own paths and to respect everyone's own path. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, what are your thoughts on the religion of the future? I think it is mentioned somewhere that it is somehow related to one of the most important tasks that are set before the Theosophical movement by those who initiated it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sani Besant talked quite a bit about the religion of the future. And this is tied to the idea of the root races, which, for those who may not be familiar with this teaching, root race is none of the ethnicities. Root races are evolutionary cycles. We are all in the fifth root race. Although the bodies that we may be occupying in any particular incarnation, anthropologically, you may trace them to different evolutionary cycles and different root races. But right now, we are all in the fifth root race, in the fifth evolutionary cycle. And the idea in the Theosophical teachings is that the sixth one, the one that is coming, not in the near future, but is coming, will be one that is more based, this evolutionary cycle will be more based on cooperation, on intuition. Let's talk about those two things: cooperation, intuition, spirituality that is not so much based on belief or blind belief, or separation, me versus you. So I think the TS is really setting the foundation for that. Just what we were talking about, how we consider that people have different paths and that, we have to respect them. That's part of the future religion, a religion that is not exclusivist. It's a religion of cooperation, not competition, not trying to get people converted to my particular view, but cooperating and seeing, okay, this is our view, our viewpoint. For whoever this is useful, we are here, instead of trying to steal people from other movements, etc. And especially the aspect of intuition is very interesting, because right now this evolutionary cycle is very mental. And this is what I was mentioning before, that Theosophy addresses quite well, giving all these explanations to our mental need to have explanations and justifications. But the next evolutionary cycle will be far more intuitive, which means that we need to learn how to contact that higher aspect in us that is beyond the mind. And I think that future religion will have a lot of mysticism, because if you read any of the mystics of any religion, but let's say, I'm familiar with the Christian mystics, and you read St. John of the Cross or Meister Eckhart or John Tauler, and they all talk about learning to go into the silence and dwelling there, longing for God. This is how they put it. And in that dwelling in silence, you start kind of attuning yourself with the divine. So I think the future religion will have a lot of that, a lot of mysticism and meditation. And really, it's pretty much what we are doing in the TS, which gradually, already the TS has influenced modern spirituality, has been heavily influenced by the Theosophical Society. A lot of approaches that are so common in the New Age and modern spirituality were first proposed by the Theosophical Society. So you can see it already how it is permeating. Of course, many times they are taken superficially, or they are taken in a self-centered way. But eventually, I think this approach will become universal, and the new religion will naturally have that approach.
Yeah, and I think it's really encouraging to know that we're moving towards that in the Theosophical Society is a great kind of workshop, kind of like
engine,
preparing our engine, preparing towards the sacred race, and I think it's really wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's both an engine and a workshop. An engine because it is stimulating all this new approach, and the workshop because this is where we are learning. We come here. I think part of the aim of the society beyond the three objects is to attract people who want to start trying a different approach to spirituality. We have all been attracted to the TS because we as a soul, let's say, are searching for a different approach. People who belong to other religions may be searching for a different approach in their own religions, or they may not. They may be fine with the traditional religion. So it is a workshop because here we have the right environment to experiment with this without somebody coming and tell us that we are breaking a dogma, that we are being heretics, without somebody coming and imposing on us things. I mean, we have plenty of instruction and suggestions, but we have the freedom to explore. So I think it is really a workshop for souls. Come to the TS and explore and try and develop. And in that sense, we are an engine. I think that TS is very influential in the world, even though we may not see it on the physical plane because our society is small. But this is always the case. Whenever there was a movement that is working on what will be common in the future, that movement is always, ignored, dismissed, many times
behind the scenes,
represented. What?
Behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes, yeah. Naturally, by definition, the majority of people will not be interested in this. But I do believe that at the level of the ideas that are the ones that rule the world, the Theosophical Society is making a huge impact. And the more earnest we are individually in our study and living theosophy, the more we can influence the world and help.
I think it's very interesting that you say that because I feel like Theosophy really makes spirituality something that's not intimidating for a lot of people. And it makes spirituality something that, like awareness, it's something that's very easy to practice and very relatable. Yet and of course it has many levels, and at every level of whatever state of development or evolution you are in, you can resonate with that and you can practice it in your own way. So I think, how do you, I'm curious to know, how do you practice Theosophy in your life? How do you deal with the stresses of life,
Yeah, in several ways. First, I think understanding correctly life helps a lot, because our mind and emotions react when we don't understand or when we think that things should be a different way. So, for example, if we think that suffering is something that should not be there, that as most of our culture thinks, that, you have to shun suffering, just, have fun, try to distract yourself, don't let yourself be aware that there may be some sorrow or something wrong. Well, if you think that suffering has no place in life, then when suffering comes, it's very difficult to relate to it. But if you understand that suffering as much as joy, and we are talking in particular about suffering now, when you understand how valuable suffering is, it's not that you like it, but it's far easier to relate to suffering when you know that this is an evolutionary force that is really helping you in so many ways. There is a pamphlet by Annie Besant, the meaning and use of pain, in which she lists and explains how suffering helps us in many different ways. And like that with everything, if we understand relationships in a different way, if we understand life in a different way, if we understand the goals of life in a different way, then that helps us a lot to deal with all of this. So that's one part of how our mind interprets reality. The other is working with awareness, as you mentioned. Learn to deal with our thoughts, our emotions, not from the point of view of trying to repress them, nor from the point of view of just justifying them and expressing them, and we don't care if we hurt other people in the process. I think awareness is an approach in which you neither repress nor you are a slave of the feelings, because you let the feelings tell you their story, and you embrace them and you listen to that, and you are aware of all the movements of consciousness. And when you are able to do that, then there is a magic in awareness that the feelings are resolved by themselves in the space of awareness. In my particular life, the teachings of Krishnamurti have helped me a lot with this. Whatever I know and whatever I've been able to do in this field, it was, in my case, thanks to Krishnamurti's teachings. Of course, there are many other teachers that talk about this. I also like very much like Nisargadatta Maharaj and Ramana Maharshi. These are two jnanis, they call them, wise, enlightened people from the Hindu tradition. But anyway, the aspect of awareness is fundamental. And then the practice of meditation, because in meditation, we learn really to have self-mastery over our thoughts and emotions, not the mastery of repressing or fighting. We learn how to let go of thoughts and emotions. When a thought comes that is not productive, when an emotion comes that is, unhealthy, we watch it and then we let it go. If we cannot let it go because something happened and our emotions are very active, then you embrace them with awareness. But before that, I find that a lot of thoughts and emotions are like superficial, that when they come, you see them and you say, this is silly, I don't want to go there, and you just let it go. If we don't realize that, then we start getting entangled, and then we may end up being in the middle of an emotional reaction. Then you have to work with awareness, as I said. So I would say, and you learn that in meditation and in your daily life, trying to bring that practice of meditation in your daily life. So I think, meditation, awareness, study. I'm compelled to say service also, because really...
Yeah, we will definitely talk about service, I'm sure.
Okay, we can talk about that. I think service is a very important aspect of our spiritual life, not only for our spiritual life, primarily to help others, but it does really help us too.
Just going back to what you said about awareness, I have a question. So, because in our awareness, we're supposed to kind of not be too self-obsessed, right? I mean, that's one way to look at it, to kind of get out of our self-obsession little by little. But at the same time, what if someone, for example, in the workplace, is really, really putting you down, right? Like if someone in my workplace has been putting me down, and then kind of stepping all over me, and so of course I can use kindness and forgiveness and all that, and I see the divine spark in her, and I see the goodness in her. But at the same time, how should I stand up for myself, and should I sort of let her know what you're doing is hurting me, is disrespecting me? Would that be a kind of self-obsession too?
Well, I mean, the answer varies depending on what you can do. I think, there is an ideal way of responding that is perhaps how a master of wisdom would respond. Now, probably 99.99% of the times we cannot respond in that way. So you try to seek what's the highest possible response. So, for example, I was in a very similar situation when I was in the lab. My boss was, he was very verbally abusive, not with ill intention. I fully understand him. He thought that this is a way that he produces good scientists. And he would always yell at me and all that. People from other lab, other rooms where there was another group of scientists would come and leave that kid alone, stop. But then I took it, I thought, the life is a training. This is on my way. I can choose to defend myself. I know how to defend myself. Actually, growing as a teenager, when I got to the TS, I realized that something that I had to learn is to do the opposite, not to defend myself. I was kind of a warrior. If you did something that was wrong, I'll get to you with all the weight of what I can, etc. So I
really
thought, yeah.
How did you?
Well, for example, I was, I think, 14. We were, and I was working as a lifeguard in a club. And there was the person that was in charge of that. And he was, I don't remember what he was doing, but he was being corrupt in some way. So I just organized the whole thing where I ended up talking to the president in a meeting where this guy was there and I was there talking to the president and denouncing what this guy was doing. And then the same happened with the psychologist, a counselor in my high school. And he also was doing something that I thought was wrong. I ended up in the radio of the city, denouncing him and things like that. So anyway, so when I came to Theosophy, I thought, okay, I need to learn a different way of dealing with these things. So when I was in that situation, I thought, instead of defending myself, I will take it. I will take it and work with this and use this as part of a training. And there were many days that I would go back home, like crying because I just wanted to yell back and to defend myself. But I said, if life is putting this in my way, I would just take it and work with all this. I'm working with the emotions and trying to. And one of my aims was that once I finished my job there, that I wouldn't have resentment against him. So I basically decided not to push back, and went through 6 years that were really tough. But after those 6 years, there was really a very noticeable change in my ability to remain calm in those situations. So that's what I chose. I didn't choose to stand up or to defend myself, etc. Now, in your particular situation, if you are able to do that, because these are all, if we believe in karma and all of this, these are all things that are part of our past karma. That doesn't mean we should always let other people walk over us. We have the right to say in a kind way, say, okay, stop. This is not a healthy relationship. I don't want to deal with this. You can say that. You have the right to do it. But if you think you can use this as a training, maybe try it and try to see how you can work with the effects of this relationship. And it will be difficult, it will be painful, but whatever you can do is, it will make you stronger. And measure your strength. If you see that at some point you cannot manage it or something, then you can try to set boundaries. So I wouldn't advise everybody to do this. That's why I say we have to measure our strength. So sometimes we do need to put boundaries. But don't think that this bad relationship, although it's painful, don't think that it's damaging you. This may be, to put it in another way, what the master is sending to you. But again, don't get too fanatical with that point of view. You have the right to defend your health. So if you think I cannot handle this, then by all means, you can take measures or talk to the boss or talk to her first. Try to, always, it doesn't work if you go on the side of anger. So, even if for a pragmatic point of view, just getting angry at the other person is not going to solve anything. So maybe if you want to solve it, I don't know if it is possible to do something kind for her, bring some gift, or to have some coffee with her, if you want to, or you can just take it. Of course, I don't know how that affects your work. All situations are complex, so I cannot tell you what to do. But there is the option of just taking it if you can, and grow with that.
Yeah, I really see like how much I can grow through this. I feel like I do believe that past karma has a part to play in this, and that but at the same time, of course, like you said, measure our strength and how much we can bear. And I think that's also awareness at play, like being aware of that we are going through this and not get swept away by it, and so we can pace ourselves. And yeah, so thank you. That's very helpful.
I think if you take the power in this, in the sense of saying, I'm not being a victim here, I am choosing to take this and to work with this. That helps a lot to our psyche. And the problem is when we feel a victim of the situation. But you can claim your power and use this for your spiritual path to the extent that you can. Again, I'm not trying to say that you should not set boundaries or limits or try to solve it. But if you choose to use this as a training, claim your power and say, I choose to work with this. I don't know if you read Castaneda. Castaneda was an anthropologist that he says that he met a Native American, Mexican Native American, who taught him some spiritual teachings. Some of them are more on the psychic aspect, and some of them are quite deep. And one thing that he was called Don Juan, the Indian wise man. And one thing that Don Juan always said is that we all have in life a pinche tirano. Pinche tirano is like a tyrant pawn. Pawn, like in the chess, where that is a pawn is a piece that is quite insignificant, It's not the queen, the king, or something high. It's just a nobody that is a tyrant with you. So pinche tirano is like a nobody that is a tyrant for you. And he said, we all have some pinche tiranos in our lives, and they are the ways that we grow. So you can take it in that way. This is my pinche tirano, and I'll try to grow with this as much as I can.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We have already touched on the topic of service a little bit. So what do you think is the meaning of service in theosophical terms and from theosophical standpoint?
Yeah. So there are two aspects to this. There is the aspect of the value of service in itself, and the value of service in our own spiritual growth. Of course, if we do service for our own spiritual growth, it's not a very pure service, right? I mean, we may be helping other people, but we do it for personal reasons. And the help is useful anyway, but we are still doing it for personal reasons, which we all start spirituality from a personal point of view. We come to this because we don't want to suffer, we want to be happy, we want to feel strong, or, that's normal. But at some point, as we go through our spiritual life, there has to be a purification in our motivation to realize that the only way we are going to be happy is if we are trying to generate happiness for everybody, including ourselves. It's not that we should make ourselves miserable and other people happy. We should try to work to help, happiness be part of life, and not the superficial happiness, because suffering is part of happiness. Happiness in the sense of this inner realization, and that inner realization needs difficulties too. Anyway, so the point is that we need to purify our motivation and more realize that our main concern is for the welfare of the whole, because we are part of that whole also, and that's the only way that we can really benefit everybody. So service is important in our spiritual path, because if it is genuine, it's perhaps the only activity that we do without seeking something for ourselves. Because we may be studying so that we know more, so that we are wiser, so that we understand life better. So that's a self-centered activity. It's not necessarily bad, we need that, but it can be a very self-centered activity. Or we may meditate with a very self-centered activity. I'm meditating because I want to be peaceful, I want to be happy, etc. But the service, if it is a true service, is that kind of activity where we are thinking about the other, not about ourselves. And that has a purifying power. And when we are interested in the welfare of others, that also purifies our own practice of meditation. It purifies our study, because our whole spiritual activity begins to be more than I want to solve my psychological issues because I want to be happy. It's not so much that, it's that we don't want to be a nuisance. We don't want to make other people suffer. We know that if there is something that we need to solve, we realize that in our relationship with people that we love, we make them suffer because I don't know how to relate to certain things that are in myself. So you start working on yourself, not because you want to be better necessarily, but because you don't want to be a source of suffering to those who you love and to anybody for that matter. So I think that service begins to take over the personal motivation. And then you realize that you are doing everything. Of course, you are enjoying the results of that, but that your main concern is helping humanity, helping the other, being a center of peace in the world, it begins to shift from the personal to the global. And as that happens, then spiritual states of consciousness begin to really open to us. Because as long as our spiritual search is personal, there is a limit to how much we can grow. But when it begins to be for everybody, then the doors open.
I see. So would you say that service is the key work of the TS? Service of the world?
I think so. And if you see early theosophical literature from Olcott, Blavatsky, the masters, you see that once and again, that the TS was founded to help humanity, not to help the individuals that are members of the society. Of course, we cannot help humanity if we ourselves need the help. It's like the blind trying to lead the blind. So the Theosophy has a lot of tools for our own growth. But the purpose is not that we grow. The purpose is that we grow so we can help. And when we come to the idea of the Masters of Wisdom and the path, that is the essential aspect. We see in our literature that the masters, the attention of the masters are attracted only to people who are interested in helping humanity. Those who are interested in their own growth, of course, they are helping the whole of humanity no matter what. But personally, they have no connection to people who are trying to grow by themselves. They let them grow by the means that are normally available to humanity, all the religions, etc., that they themselves have founded or created. But those people who want to help humanity, they attract the attention of the masters because these are the people that if they can help these people grow faster, which many times means dealing with all these difficulties, but if they can help these people grow faster, then what they are doing is getting another helper of humanity, and that's their main motivation. So I think that yes, service is the main purpose, the ultimate purpose of all of this.
And I feel like definitely the youth has a big role to play in the future of service, world service. The youth nowadays, they are faced with a lot of self-isolation, a lot of loneliness, which is ironic given that the world has gotten more globalized and connectivity is even more rampant. I mean, even more widespread and attainable. What are your views on the loneliness and the feeling of, so if we can't help ourselves, how do we feel for others? How do we help others? We want to connect with others, but we're always, but there's this loneliness that is plaguing a lot of youths. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what are your views on that?
I think it's part of, the way that I grew up, I'm old enough to having grown up in a world where there were no electronics, cell phones and all that. And then it was easier. I grew up playing with friends, playing outside, relating to friends, etc., like face to face. And as all these other means of communication appear, and the video games and all that, then I think that connection, face-to-face connection, it has been reduced to a large extent. And there is something that is missing. It's the same that happens when we live in cities. Because, for example, where there is nature, there is not only nature, which in itself is beautiful, but there are forces in nature that are stimulating to any form of life that is around. So, for example, there are the devas that are stimulating the growth of a tree. These are, let's say, kinds of consciousness, the devas, that stimulate the evolution of the tree. And whenever we are sitting under a tree, we are within the aura of these devas. And we are also nourished by the consciousness of the deva. And there are, all these devas or angels, or the Greeks would call them gods, animating the forest and the mountains and the rivers, etc. When we retreat from that and come to a city, we isolate ourselves from that kind of life. And then we also stimulate each other when we are in the presence of each other in a similar way. So here again, when we isolate ourselves and only communicate by electronic means, we lose that nourishment that we have when we are face to face with people. I mean, I love technology, and we can have this conversation thanks to technology. So it's not that technology is wrong, it's that it should not replace completely our interaction with life, with people, with nature, etc. So I think that's part of what is happening in the world today. And one way we can help is to make people aware of this, to make people aware of the need to spend some time in nature, go to a park, be in touch with people. We do have a social problem with this. And I have seen some researches. Fortunately, there are some scientists that are working on this. I read a few days ago some experiments that people with depression that were exposed to nature, I think they had to go to a park every day, and they reduced the symptoms of depression as much as those who just took the medication. So science is beginning to understand this, and it's very important that science do, because then they can reach a population that we Theosophists can't, simply because these people won't come to our talks. But that idea that nature is important may very well have been produced by our studies, or not only the TS, the studies of spiritual people in whatever organization. But this is what I was saying, that I do believe we are influencing the world in ways more important than we are aware of, because all these ideas start filtering through other people. So, yeah, I think something that the youth group could do is to have some meetings about this. In our youth group, we used to organize, say, for a weekend, a kind of workshop, all-day workshop or 2 days workshop, and talk about all these things. Don't give a lecture about karma and reincarnation. Try to, you do whatever you want to do. I'm just saying what we were thinking at the time. Let us talk about the problems that we face. For example, isolation. And then we look at that from a theosophical point of view. So you introduce theosophical ideas by trying to illuminate a problem that we actually have, instead of giving a talk in abstract of a theosophical subject. We found that very effective. So we would search what problem is in society, this one. Okay, how would we look at this from a theosophical point of view? And that's what we would offer. So yeah, that would be something interesting if you are concerned about this, to do and gear it toward young people.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have touched on the three crucial aspects of our growth: study, meditation, and service. the question I would like to ask you, what does it mean to be a Theosophist? What is your view on that?
I mean, the word theosophy, as we know, means divine wisdom. And by divine wisdom, the way that I understand it is that this is a wisdom that doesn't come from the study of theosophy. It doesn't come from experience. You know, if you have enough experience in a job, a trade, a sport, you can become wise about that. If you study enough, you can become wise, in quotation marks, about that subject. But that's kind of human wisdom that is attained by this means. I think the divine wisdom is something that is within. It's a wisdom that doesn't come from any of this. Now, the study, meditation, and service are means that can help us touch that divine wisdom. So to me, to be a Theosophist is to be a person that is searching to touch the divine wisdom, so that everything we do is so that it can help us touch that divine wisdom. Now, this is an allegorical way of talking. Whenever we talk about these things, it's allegorically. What do we mean by touching that divine wisdom? But what I mean is that with all our study, meditation, and service, gradually we become more attuned to something in us that begins to change our personality. And it may make us a little calmer, a little more compassionate, or a little more enthusiastic, or whatever it is. Our personalities are different, and the effect of the divine wisdom on us may be different too. But essentially it's that a Theosophist is seeking to touch that divine wisdom. Otherwise, we may be in the TS just having fun, you know, nothing wrong about fun. But if all our activities are a kind of spiritual entertainment, we will have a great time, but we won't be much different throughout the years. So we can have fun, but also we can try to see how what we do can help us be aligned with that divine wisdom.
So would you say that people are born Theosophists, or do they become Theosophists somehow in the process of their life? Or is it a combination of both, maybe?
Yeah, I would say it's a combination of both. I think we have been searching for this divine wisdom for several incarnations. If we are really interested and committed, that means that this is not our first incarnation. In general, the first incarnation that we come in contact with that is a kind of brief, superficial interest. And then in a future incarnation, we may recognize some of that. And once we feel at home with this, that means that we have been in whatever way, you know, whether with mystics or Neoplatonists or this or that we have been in previous incarnations seeking for this. So we gradually grow more and more into a Theosophist, and definitely coming in touch with this in this lifetime is because to some extent we are Theosophists, and this also will help us deepen that our theosophical nature. So all this is a gradual process. It's not like flipping a switch. So it's both, I would say.
And how has your journey been? Yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm. How has your journey of gradually getting closer and closer to the divine wisdom within you?
Yeah.
How has it been for you?
I guess it's like the half empty or half full glass. If I look back, I can say that there have been very meaningful changes in my life, in my personality and all that. But if I look at the ideal that we see, for example, in the masters, I would say I'm so far away that it looks like nothing changed. So, we have these two different ways of looking at this, which should not be depressing or anything. On the contrary, this should be something encouraging in the sense that there is always something greater to explore, something greater to long for, to love, loving virtue, loving perfection, in the spiritual sense, loving however we put it, is something that keeps us always motivated. So I think in this journey, just as I said, I'm so grateful to Theosophy. I think I would be very different if I had not encountered Theosophy, but there is still so much journey ahead, which keeps everything interesting.
Yes, I totally agree. And speaking of now, maybe we can touch on like the future of Theosophy. So now that we have the World Federation of Young Theosophists, what do you envision for our group and what it can do for the PS and for the world? And yeah.
Well, I think I should be the one asking that question to you. What do you think is the future of Theosophy? When we were in the youth group and we were trying to envision where we thought or what we thought was the future of Theosophy, something that was clear to us at the time is that Theosophy had to be made practical, because we were in a country where there was a lot of knowledge of Theosophy and we really benefited by that. It was far easier to learn Theosophy because we had very knowledgeable members around, very devoted. But the way that we perceived it is that it was more like Theosophy was more like a philosophy in general. Of course, there were many members that were very, practical also. But in general, we saw that the approach to Theosophy was intellectual and more like a philosophy. So we tried to work to make Theosophy practical, to apply Theosophy to our lives. And I think that's something that needs to happen still in the world. These things change very slowly. So part of what I try to work for and I envision is to stimulate the living of Theosophy and to find ways to practice it and to bring it to our daily life and not just as information. But then, I'm sure that as you start this journey, you will see aspects to be developed that, my generation doesn't see. And I hope that is so, because that will ensure that our organization continues to grow. Talking to the older members when I was young, they used to talk about the limitations of the previous generation, and they took a step forward from what they got. And hopefully my generation helped to take a step forward. And I hope that your generation also will find ways to improve all of this. So I will be interested, if not now, whenever you talk about this, to see what you see that should be the future of Theosophy.
Do you think there are such things as traps on the way of theosophical development, maybe, or in the way we are investigating life that young theosophists can fall into? And if so, maybe some recommendations?
Yeah. Well, something typical that everybody says about the youth, and that I always said, well, that doesn't apply to us. And looking back, I say, well, it did apply to us. It's this idea, like when we are young, we tend to, or at least, I don't know, you are probably far wiser than we were, but I think we were quite right in our assessments, in some of our assessments of what the TS needed and all that. But we had that innocent arrogance of not having enough experience behind you. So there are many things that I criticized, etc., that I understand why those things were done in that way. And even though I tried to do them differently, I think I was unfair in my assessment. So part of what is important is to keep in mind, and at all ages, because we tend to do that always, but to keep in mind that our perception, our understanding is always limited. So with the amount of information that we have at the moment, this seems to be the right way to go. But keep some humility, recognizing that there are many things that we are not seeing. That is not so that we don't do anything, we don't try to change anything. The idea of that humility so that we can soften things. Because I think I have been harsh, or in the past when dealing with these things, just because I wasn't all that aware that there were many things that maybe I wasn't perceiving. And another trap is the question of trying to change for the sake of change. I think a gift that any younger generation brings is that they don't have the burden of the past, and therefore they can see things in different ways that maybe our conditioning doesn't allow us to do that. So that is the gift part. But at the same time, we have to be aware of what the organization is meant to be, because many times it happens that a person comes and says, oh, the TS is doing this wrong, the TS should do this other thing. And sometimes those other things that are being proposed are not really part of what the purpose of the TS is. So an important aspect is to learn, to read about, read the Mahatma letters or things that what the masters say about the Theosophy and the TS, to read the early Theosophists, to read, what the leaders have said about the work of the TS, so that we learn where the TS is going. And then in that context, then the youth has that possibility of seeing better ways of going in that direction. So the trap is changing the direction in ways that the TS is not meant to do it, simply because we see that something doesn't work, and then we decide to go in a different direction. Those are the two things that maybe are not an issue with you. I can only reflect on what happened with us. And although we were always quite aligned with the purpose of the TS, there were always some, young members that wanted to do something completely different that is not what the TS wanted to do. So that those two things, the humility to understand that we don't perceive everything, and the willingness to change, but within the context of a knowledge of what the TS is supposed to be.